Good evening and welcome to tonight's Hearthstone Half Hour. I'm Hammy, this is Felcroft Cast. Hope you're well this Wednesday evening, and we're going to be jumping into something a little bit different this Wednesday night. It's Ladder Wednesday. On Wednesdays we generally jump into the ladder, and we've had our Priest control deck for as long as we can remember, really giving that a good go. We've got to the stage where, as we may have seen if you tuned into last week's episode, we're basically feeling a little bit down on the Priest. The Priest has been good to us. We really got into things as an old school World of Warcraft player playing Priest. Just couldn't let it go, but got to the stage where really we need to try something a bit different. And we know what the big decks are out there. We know it's a very aggro heavy. If you've been playing in ladder, you'll see it's very aggro heavy. Lots of early hitting, hard hitting decks, bits and bobs of control and things that duke around it. We could be taking a look at all of the Druid decks, and we shall in future. And we could be having a look at also all of the Warlock and similar that have been kicking around. Warrior, also not the form we played the other day, which had a slightly outdated card in, but other forms of Warrior also very popular. So what we're actually going to do today, and the reason for this is because I took a look at my videos the other day and I've only ever done one video on Shaman. So Shaman are also, they've had a bit of a tough time recently in the world of Hearthstone. They have not been played a huge amount, yet they're a class that, when you look at the hero and look at some of their abilities, seem as though they should have a good chunk of potential. So what we're going to do today is, for today's Ladder Wednesday, and also as a little bit of an exploration, we're going to take a look at the Shaman and see what kind of tools he has, why Thrall himself has not been seeing so much play of late. We're going to try and cobble together a deck list based off a bit of deck listing and a bit of what we've just run through in terms of the Shaman class, and then we are going to dive straight into some ladder games. Now there's only a few days left to go of Test Season 4, or Live Season 4 I guess is it now. So given that I'm pretty low in the ladder, I've not been doing huge amounts of laddering, not stuck the time into it over this season, I'm not going to be getting anywhere near Legend rank or anything anytime soon. So now is the absolute perfect time before a ladder reset to draft some new decks with some new heroes, or heroes that we haven't done so much of, and then see how they perform out in a ladder environment. And good evening, welcome to you guys who are just joining us on the stream. Great to see you live, and just shout away with any questions you may have. Let us get straight stuck in. So let us firstly do as we always do in the wonderful world of adventuring and jump into my collection and have a look at Shaman. So whether you're a new player and you've not really seen a huge amount of Shaman, and whether you're a sort of slightly more experienced player, have been getting involved in it a little bit, we're just going to take a quick dive under the hood of what Shaman actually have. Shaman have got some pretty cool tools. Firstly, if you have a look at the old Shaman hero, he has the power of summoning totems, and totems of course have all kinds of cool abilities. Again, Hearthstone mirroring the sort of lore and spirit of the class of World of Warcraft. Shamans have totems. Shamans in World of Warcraft, they can heal, they can do a little bit of transforming, they can do a little bit of spell casting, and that is very much reflected in these cards. You may immediately think jack of all trades, and in some ways the Shaman is a little bit like that. Summoning the totems can give you a very strong board, so you've got lots of abilities in the Shaman deck that will actually give you totems health. Anything that buffs a minion can of course buff a totem, because a totem is a minion, so you can give your minions attack and similar. And you can see that you've got taunt options and all different kinds of things here, as well as being able to swing a weapon. Is he a mage? Is he a weapon class? Is he a caster? Is he a minion charging buffing machine? A Shaman, if played with certain neutral minions, could fill some of these reasonably well. However, what it doesn't do massively is have one particularly specialist thing, I would say, that really forces it through. And the problem is that in the current environment, if you're playing ranked, there is just so much early aggression. And the thing is with Shaman is that if you're going to summon your totems and do things with your totems, if you're if you're not running sort of say cheap minions, Murlocky rushy things, Shamans do quite well with those because they've got some buffs too. Effectively, you're going up against your hunters, the warriors that can sort of soak up your damage, and if you're getting sort of controlled, or all of this aggro is sort of in your face and taking your stuff down, you're really just not really able to get going, at least with my very little bit of Shaman experience. So having a flick through, what has Shaman got in the deck that could potentially help us out a bit? Well, we do have some pretty crazy burst damage. If you have spell power, the overload mechanic of course with Shaman also means that you can get effectively more powerful spells out more early. So if I play an Overload card, I will have 2 less mana, or however much on the card, as we can see there on Lightning Storm. Whatever the number is next to Overload is the amount of mana you will have less next turn, meaning that effectively you get short-term gain for slightly more long-term pain. You're going to be a bit hindered because you've got less mana to cast with in your next turn. So the Overload mechanic pinning through Shaman does have a bit of that going on. Bloodlust, 3 attack next turn if you've got obviously a lot of cheap minions on the board. If you've got 4 or 5 minions with +3 attack and there's no tanks in the way, self-explanatory exactly how painful that could be. Brilliant buffs with the Shamans. Burst damage, absolutely fantastic. All of the spellcasting, some good control there to a degree. The 0/1 Taunting Frog, of course, of Hex, meaning that you can polymorph effectively those painful minions, transform them and then zap them out the way, giving them 1 health instead of how many health and attack they might have at that time. Burst damage, Lava Burst again with Overload. If you're looking at Lava Bursts and Lightning Storms with Overload, you can be throwing down loads and loads of damage. Flame Tongue Totem, again a very fun and useful Shaman tool. Again, if your adjacent minions have got 2 attack, you can be giving your totems attack that traditionally have 0, unless they are the little fiery totem whose name I temporarily forget. Flame Tongue, Spitting Totem, whatever it's called. And equally, if you've got minions on the board, you're buffing them too. So you can see the Shaman have got the buffs. Wind Fury buff for 2 attacks in 1 turn. A little Res and Ancestral Spirit, and then you can be swinging with some of these axes as well. So although I believe, yep, I'm all of the way with most Shaman cards. Shaman, as you can see, have got some interesting tools that they can use. But what we're going to do now is, because we've had a little look at those tools, I mean, Caster, we've seen that there's this aggro problem. Anytime I've tried to give Shaman a little go, even in just the normal games, there's a bit of an aggro problem. So what we're going to do is go for a deck. We've taken a look at HearthstonePlayers.com on this occasion. I will link to this in the article after we've finished and in the YouTube description so you can take a look. It's by one of their guest authors. Now, the reason I've gone for this is because it's been written not too long ago by someone called Francisco. So thank you very much, Francisco. We're going to take a look into your mid-range Shaman deck. Relying on removal. Shamans have some good removal. And they can do lots and lots of burst damage. So what we're going to do is effectively really take control in the early game, draw loads of cards as much as we can, hopefully meaning that we can get lots and lots of big minions out sort of in the mid game. As we've said, there's so much aggro, we need to make sure that we, against the aggro decks, things that try and rush or swarm you early on with lots of small minions, we need to be able to prevent that. So we need to be able to remove cards from the table, and we need to be using our control spells or our removal spells to effectively keep the opponent's minions on the board under control. We can't get overrun with too many minions. So that's going to require some quite careful use of things like Lightning Storm. The Overload mechanic is something we're just going to have a little look at and keep an eye on. Obviously, if you play the wrong card at the wrong time and you're left with no mana when you need it, then you're going to be having a few problems. So have to keep an eye on that. If you can stay in control, so as Francisco with this deck sort of early in the game, then you're already most of the way there. But also, what we're going to have is a deck with lots of minions that we can whip out nice and quickly, sort of for that instant kind of thing. So let us find where let's get our new deck and let us pull out our Shamanic hero. And oh of horrors of horrors, I still haven't even quite finished my Shaman deck yet, so we're going to mix it up as much as we can. First up, Earthshock. Earthshock silencing a minion, doing the 1 damage. The silence, so many minions that have horrible little spell casting effects, whether it's Northshire Priests with a Priest for the draw, spell power cards, tanking cards, you name it. Earthshock on 1 damage, giving that silence and the 1 damage. If you want to pick off a minion you can, but the silence will be just as valuable for that very cheap amount of mana. 2 of those straight in. Absolutely no decision required there. Next up, 2 Fork Lightning. 2 damage to 2 random minions with an overload of 2. Well, that can be used very early on in the game to put lots of pressure on in terms of, again, cheap removal of minions, but just remember that 2 overload. You need to be careful while you're managing that. Next we have Lightning Bolt. Again, lots and lots of burst damage from the Shaman deck. You can see again with the overload mechanic, 3 damage for that mere 1 mana, but of course you're, you know, doing the damage short term to lose that damage ability next turn, perhaps a little bit with that one overload as well. So you can see a lot of the pain that we're going to be bringing here. Rock Biter Weapon is next up. Now note that that says friendly character, so it just doesn't have to be your Shaman. It doesn't have to be your hero Thrall himself. You can actually go and buff your minions with that Rock Biter as well. So a nice little thing to have in your armory there. Next up, we're going to go for 2 Stormforged Axe. It's an overload of 1, of course, to play that, but you can get it away on turn 2. And then that again is another, you can either be buffing yourself with it, but you can use that in card games. People talk a lot about resources, you know, the amount of cards you have in your hand is a resource, what you've got on your table is a resource, and then also your health can be treated as a resource. In this sense, if I can use my Stormforged Axe to remove a painful minion, and with that 3 durability on this axe I can actually swing that a few times, then what we've actually got is using your health. Yeah, sure, you'll take some damage on your hero, but you're using it to get that board control. So using your health as a resource, probably something we'll come to in future, but the axe will let you have a bit more control as well. Next up is Wind Fury. Self-explanatory. If I've got a minion out and I fancy him having 2 swings in 1 turn, then for 2 mana, if I've got something that does a lot of damage, Wind Fury is going to let me do some serious pain. Absolute no-brainer. Next up, the Flame Tongue Totem that we've just mentioned as well. Flame Tongue giving us that ability to buff our fellow minions and get loads and loads and loads of pressure on, which is absolutely awesome. Big minions get bigger, small new minions suddenly become a threat and can be used to trade, and above all, if you've got your totems down, you can be using Flame Tongue to even attack with totems, so that is great stuff. The next option in this deck would have been Nat Pagal. If we just have a quick look at Nat Pagal in crafting mode, you can see he's the legendary fisherman himself from World of Warcraft, inventing the Auto Angler 3000, Extendo Pole 3000 and the Luromatic 2099. Clearly still in testing. At the start of your turn, 50% chance to draw an extra card. If you get Nat Pagal down early in the game and he procs a couple of times, by proc I mean his ability actually triggers, it's a 50% chance, so it's effectively a coin flip, then you're getting a lot of extra cards early on in the game. We will replace him at the end. I'm just going to take a little note, and as we've discussed before in the Hearthstone Half Hour, if you're not able to precisely deck list and copy a deck, what you should do is try and stay as close as possible to the original deck. If you move too far away from it, you're going to be losing the theme and the general drive of what it was trying to do to start with. And once you've completed trying to deck list your deck, make sure you understand how the deck works and then go back and see what kind of replacements you can make. So we need to try and replace 1 Nat Pagal in this deck. Nat Pagal, the card drawing fisherman himself. So let's get out of crafting mode and swiftly charge on. Feral Spirit is our next option. Now, 2/3 Spirit Wolves with Taunt. What this is a clutch card in some ways, but it's a real good shield in others. It is 2 overload, but 2/3 Spirit Wolves. It's not like the mages mirror image or similar. Your wolves can bite back, they've got some attack, and even though you're going to be 2 mana down on the next turn, Feral Spirit means that you can get 2 minions into play real quick that can not only protect you, but do some pain as well. You can start trading away with those 2, so that will be quite interesting to have a good play with. Up next we have Hex, as we discussed. This is control, crowd control, pure and simple. If there is a really, really big or powerful minion that is doing you damage or something awkward in some way or another, Hex negates that threat. Vital, vital, vital. Polymorph is the term for this kind of thing. You can call it a charm card in other card games, but what it does is effectively let you take a threat out of play. Removal, some call it as well, called it removal to all intents and purposes at the beginning of this episode, so that is why Hex is going to make it in. Next one, let us take one of our shinies and one of our normals. We shall go for the gold, and you can hear that zappy zappy sound of the disenchanting on this occasion, but it's Lightning Storm. That is your area of effect, or some people refer to it as AoE spell. Another AoE spell, all enemy minions will take 2 or 3 damage. Hey, if I'm playing a bunch of Murlocs, or if I'm playing a Hunter and they've got lots of minions with low health, trying to get 2, 3, 4, 5 minions down on the board, and they're all going to be picking away at you with their attack, 1 Lightning Storm negates that threat. So again, control, removal, whatever you want to call it, it is letting you okay, with an overload sort of penalty, but it is letting you control your opponent's minions in certain situations. If your opponent doesn't have minions on the board, then they've got a big less threat depending on their deck in terms of doing damage to you and doing damage to your minions as well. So very, very key. Next would have been the Tinkmaster himself. Now I can see why this guy's in there. Tinkmaster Overspark. Now Tinkmaster was played quite a lot as a late game, another control card, and the reason for Tinkmaster is that his ability used to be different. It was transform a minion into a 5/5 Devilsaur or a 1/1 Squirrel. With that, you can see now it says random. So Tinkmaster was played as a control card. You could bring him into play, and why would you want to transfer something into a 5/5 Devilsaur? Is it a tank, a taunting minion that you need to get past? In some situations, is it an Illidan? I don't know. Is it something like a Ysera? Is it a Ragnaros, an even more powerful, scary minion? Even if you turned an 8/8 Ragnaros into a 5/5 Devilsaur, you know what? That takes a lot of danger off the table. So Tinkmaster was again another polymorph control card. He's been made a bit weaker now. A lot of people have disenchanted him and don't play him. So, but the theme of that card being in this deck was to it can still do a little bit of stuff, but with the sort of recent little tweak it's had, it's not quite so viable. So I don't have one, so it's not really a choice for me, but I'm going to see if I can swap that out for something else. So we're one Tinkmaster down at this point in time. Mana Tide Totem. I'm going to craft me another one of those. So 2 of those drop into my deck. And Mana Tide, in terms of crazy drawingness, we can see at the end of your turn draw a card. That's even more of a sure thing than Nat Pagel himself. So you just want to be drawing loads of cards of this deck early in the game. Mana Tide gives you the capacity to do so. And the next one in this deck, and I can fully see the reason for this in terms of the late game charging and pain, is Leroy himself. Leroy is a clutch card that I really need to get because he has use in Hunter decks as well. You'll see him in a lot of rushy decks, and you can see with his relatively low mana cost, tiny health, but very, very solid attack. He can charge, he does summon those 2 whelps, but you're bringing in Leroy and swinging with him at a time when you've almost finished your opponent off, and 2 1/1 whelps aren't going to do too much. As you can see, I do not have him as well, so Leroy Jenkins goes onto our list of people we will have to replace in some form or another. Doomhammer. Doomhammer is the epic of the epics in terms of swinging with Shaman. Now Doomhammer, we can see it's got Wind Fury, so you can attack twice with it and overload, but so much durability that that card will be swinging and doing a lot of control. You're going to be able to pick a reasonable amount of minions off with that, or be doing regular consistent damage to the enemy hero. Again, don't have a Doomhammer, so we're going to have to replace something weapony in terms of that idea. Next we can very, very easily grab a couple of Azure Drakes. You can basically see that the purpose of that in the deck is to not only give you spell damage, the spell damage will help more of your control spells, but also the battle cry of drawing a card goes on with the card drawing theme, so a nice little fill card there. Next up, 2 of Argent Commander, the trading card. Oh, not quite such a funny, but I can't resist saying it every time it comes up, but it lets you do a mid to late game trade, or if there's nothing on your opponent's side of the table, you can be using it to swing and do some good damage. That charge and the Divine Shield generally let you reach out, and either if you can't get rid of a bad minion on your opponent's side of the table, you can certainly get it low and then pick it off with something else. So the Argent Commander, very, very versatile, lovely thing as well. Fire Elemental, oh, Fire Elemental, wherefore art thou? Fire Elemental is the earn card, isn't it? I've still not earned my Fire Elemental, so I'm just going to go into crafting mode. The Fire Elemental is one of your big finishes. It's terrible. You can see that I haven't played Shaman to much of a degree, but if you look at the Fire Elemental, what it does is effectively does 3 damage when it's brought into play, so it's got an instant in terms of doing some damage. We are going to very shamedly have to replace Fire Elemental, because there's 2 of those in there. We're going to have to replace that to big style. Alakir the Windlord, was the final one in here, because basically it's got Wind Fury, it can strike twice, it can charge straight in, it's got a Divine Shield, and it's a tank. So for the 3 health, I'm going to pick my favourite late game finisher and to take a good old Ragnaros instead, most probably. Spell damage +5 could be very interesting for Malagos as well. Let's put in a Raggy for the time being. Pardon to me. Okie dokie. So we have managed to get ourselves to 27 out of 30, and we are, I believe, 27 out of 30. I've actually added something in. Let's try and work out what I've added in that probably should not be there. What is not meant to be here? Nak, Pagel, Tinkmaster and Leroy we're going to need to replace, but there was a Doomhammer as well. And that's it, we've got 1 Wind Fury instead of 2. Okay, let's drop down 1 Wind Fury then, try and deck list it up. So we need to replace, and I've also doubled up on something else. I've doubled up on Fork Lightning as well. So we need to replace a Nak Pagel. So in terms of our looking at how, once you've copied a deck list, you need to... Hello. Thank you very much. It's good to see you, Ice Crowned, in the chat. Cool. So, when in previous episodes we have talked about doing deck listing and sort of copying deck lists and similar, you know, lots of people do it. It's nothing to be ashamed of. You just need to make sure that you understand what the deck is trying to do, and that when you copy it, you try and copy it as generally as you can, so that you've got as many of the cards that the original player was trying to sort of have in there as possible. The more cards that you don't have, the more you're going to get away from the theme. If you do have to replace cards, you then have to go through a process where you actually try and swap as much like for like as possible, if not in terms of specific ability, then an actual theme. So we need to replace Nat Pagel. Now Nat Pagel was giving a 50% chance at the beginning of your turn to draw a card. So what we could really do with is something else that will let us draw cards. When I generally tend to go something, I'm going to go for a Loot Hoarder, and the reason that I've gone for a Loot Hoarder is basically because he gives a guaranteed draw of 1 card. Nat Pagel would obviously let you draw a bunch more cards, potentially. However, the Loot Hoarder at least gives a guaranteed 1, so it's not the best replacement for loads of card drawing. But if I get a Loot Hoarder in the early game and I drop him and he dies, I can do some damage, I can do a trade, and I can draw a card. So a budget replacement may not perhaps give as many cards, but will definitely give at least 1. So for that reason, Nat Pagel out, Loot Hoarder in. Second one, Tinkmaster Overspark. Now we remember that Tink was sort of a later game control card. He was allowing basically effectively a silence type effect, generally allowing you to sort of silence some kind of minion, or perhaps polymorph it as well. So you don't have to really replace, even in terms of the mana cost necessarily directly, but I'm looking for something that will either complement the theme of my deck, let me draw cards, let me swing away with powerful minions, or actually jump on in and do something a little bit more painful. Because I'd like another silence, I'm going to go with the Spellbreaker. So the Spellbreaker has a Battle Cry of Silence, he's 4 mana. I can throw him on in, and like Tinkmaster Overspark, I can use him to try and do a bit of silencing as well. So Tinkmaster out, Spellbreaker in. Third card was Leroy Jenkins, and we saw that his purpose was effectively to come out for sort of a reasonable amount of mana and do charge on in and do a bunch of damage. So there is a budget substitute for Leroy. We've already got 2 of them in forms of the Argent Commander. That is also quite solid, but there is another option, and I just need to be able to try and remember what its name actually is. The Faceless Manipulator is not a bad card to drop in as a random substitute, but I think it might even be 3 mana if we charge in a bit harder. Where has he gone? Where has he gone? Where has he gone? He is the Arcane Golem. Charge, Battle Cry, and giving your opponent a mana crystal, but he fulfills that 4/2 kind of option. He is a bit cheaper, so he's going to be swinging a bit early. mid-range. We were generally trying to hit around the sort of 5-6 mana mark. That was our goal. But there are 5-6 mana cards with charge. Captain Greenskin, giving a weapon a +1/+1 could be an interesting option if we have a weapon out. But we really want to have things that have some charge in. They can swing in and they can do some pain. There's not a huge amount in this kind of mana range that's going to be letting us do that. So let's try to start with trying to use that Arcane Golem instead. Leroy out, Arcane Golem in. Finally we've got Doom Hammer, and then we were going to have 2 Fire Elementals. Now with the 2 Fire Elementals, they were looking to be probably our sort of late game heavy hitters and finishers around that 6 mana mark, but they also did direct damage. So we would like some, you know, minions around that level that are perhaps going to do that kind of damage, and they're really acting as some of our late game finishers as well. Anything that does some direct damage lets us have that element of control. There's nothing hugely. We are going to be trying to draw lots of cards, so there could be an interesting option. We could go as a mid-range card, even in terms of the Mountain Giant. It costs 1 less for each card in our hand. If we're just trying to draw lots of cards and get lots of cards drawn, then the Mountain Giant could come out for quite cheap as a mid-range real piece of pain. Worth considering. The direct damage is a nice control from the Fire Elemental. The Mountain Giant has got good health. You know what, I'm going to try, let's see if we can make 2 Molten Giants work, costing 1 less for each card in our hand. So without further ado, let us throw ourselves into, after a little bit more than half hour, this Ladder Wednesday. A level 6 Shaman. This could go so badly wrong, but let's see what goes on. Be interested to see what's going on.
Thrall versus Rexar.
Let the hunt begin for Doomhammer.
And as we swing straight into this first game against the well-renowned Hunter of Yore, we need to have a look at what we're going to be trying to get out nice and early on in this first game. So our goal probably in the early game is that we want to be drawing cards, of course. We want to be getting out there and drawing hard as quickly as we can. So we're quite happy to keep the Mana Tide. The Stormforged Axe will let us do some control. I'm going to bin Wind Fury and Azure Drake just because we're not going to need those hugely in the early game. We want to be focusing on keeping the board under control and drawing cards. We are going second, of course, which means we get that coin. Will let us accelerate things out a little bit as well. That's going to be good. Turn 1, can't be doing anything apart from drawing a Stormforge, so I'm just going to knock on the table, but I'm going to get that Mana Tide Totem down. Turn 2, I think, will be quite vulnerable, but we'll see what Ediv has in store for us as well. Just a solid and steady shot there. Pushing him right in. What have I got? The Flame Tongue Totem. I could just stick a random totem into play. That may help me protect my Mana Tide. The Mana Tide will let me draw a card, but then it may be a bait target. Because I've not played this before, let's get our Mana Tide Totem straight down and see what our Shaman here can do against this Hunter, whether the Hunter is actually going to really put loads and loads of pressure and try and think, right, I'm going to remove this Mana Tide Totem. Generally with cards that draw cards, if they need to wait for an effect to trigger, people like to burst them down because they don't want you to draw cards. So I think of the Northshire Priest, for example. When that comes in, I think of other cards like I don't know, things that draw Nat Pagels, as we've just discussed, are another good example. Sometimes people will take out your Leopard Gnome, even though it's got a guaranteed card draw anyway. There goes the Random Beast, and he's got a Charging Huffer. So there we go. He did strike a little bit lucky there, but the Random Beast turned out to be one that could take away our Port Totem. So we got some options here. The Earth Shock will let us pick off the minion. What I could probably just do here, I think it's what I'm going to do, is just get straight up with the axe. And I'm actually going to trade away my health. Although that's given me 4 damage worth of pain, it's let me take the initiative and put some control on the board. Now, I could have overloaded, but this Lightning Storm I really want to keep until he's got a lot more cheap minions down on the table. So let's see what he does there. It'll be good to see what kind of thing he's got going on. Whenever a friendly beast dies, the Scavenging Hyena will gain +1/+1. This is the very kind of deck we wanted to work against, so we need to see how much control we have. Okay, 10-3, we've not perhaps drawn as much, and remember, because of our overload, we're 1 down sadly. If we do that again, then we'll only have 3 mana next go. However, we want to be drawing cards, and we will have the ability to keep the table firmly locked down and under control. So I'm going to go ahead and summon my Feral Wolves, which is lovely, and they give me some lovely protection straight off the bat, and I'm actually going to take another piece of initiative and remove that from the table. So as we discussed earlier, we will cover it in a different episode, but health is a resource you need to look after. Oh, and multi-shot comes out. Fantastic clearance there from the Hunter. We still have the deck under control, but probably not under as much control as I dare say we would like. At this point in time, we could charge in and start whacking away, but I don't want to be giving my opponent mana crystals at this point in time. So what I am going to do is, I think, for the time being, we're just going to have to totem up. And that would have been absolutely ideal if it had come out and decided to be a nice chunky healing totem, however, a nice taunting tanking totem, for example. But at this point in time, sadly, all we have is a healing totem, which would be great if I had some minions, but I do not.
I've got a heat.
And there goes the battle cry, the Stormpike Commando, an interesting choice, but that has actually gone ahead and removed my totem as well. A bit of a pain there, sad times on that front. The Mountain Giant I could drop, but what I really want to be doing is continuing, of course, to keep the deck under control. So my option here is to... I don't want to take any more damage, if at all possible, on my Shaman. What this deck does not have in is healing, so for that reason I'm going to be keeping pressure on, keeping the deck under control, and then with our original deck we were looking to be a big threat, 10, 5 and 6. So I can be that threat. The Mountain Giant may actually work out in that regard, because I've got a lot of cards in my hand. We've kept a reasonable amount of balance on the table, and I will have enough cards to play that for fairly cheap mana. 2 tanks, that will give him the ability just to keep wailing away at me. However, I now have 2 Mountain Giants, so there's going to be some pain. There's going to be some good pain that we can bring out here. 2 to 3 damage. We don't know whether it would pick off the tank or not, so I'm not going to even try at this point in time. The other option we can take is, I think it's Giant time. The other thing I could also do is drop in a Silence when I want to swing through this Mogshrin Warden. That's why the Spellbreaker is very, very useful at this point. The first thing I'm going to do, just as a default, I think, is trade away that bear. The bear will do me some damage. Into play comes my Mountain Giant, which will immediately give him something he has to try and focus down. And then, to add insult to injury, I could take a swing. I'm not going to take a swing at his hero. There's no point giving him +2 attack at this point in time with that totem. So the Stone Claw nicely comes out, totally random of course, but what that then gives me is that little bit of shielding insurance. If he wants to get to me, if he wants to try and pick off my Giant, he's going to have to do something else first. There goes the multi-shot, so he does pick off my tank. That brings me to 5. Does he have anything that can actually take out my Giant? Because if he doesn't, I'm still doing some solid damage to him next turn. Arcane Shot brings me down another 2. Yeah, it does bring me down to 3. You can do 2 to my hero, which he will do. Okay, done. Another pressure. So the Hunter now, of course, is going to try and rush me down. What I need to do is just make sure I keep his minions fully under control, and then my big minion should swing in for the win. The enemy is pondering, and I'm going to squish some pumpkins as he goes. So, although we are half his health, he doesn't have a huge amount of cards in hand. We've got 1 solid minion on the table, and we are in a position where we can start laying some pain. But what we just need to be very careful with is our sort of good next move. The adjacent minions having 2 attack could be a play. We are not going to be picking off that Warden because we're going to be silencing it through the Spellbreaker before we start doing some damage. So let's do that first, just to work out our next play after that. Minions with 2 attack, a Rockbiter would swing in. I don't want to be giving him mana crystals or anything until I've got a few more options down on the deck. So what I may do to start with is no point lightning storming. I may just try and see if I can get another minion on the deck. The healing totem, lovely. That will at least heal up my mountain giant a bit, make it that little bit harder for him to do some of that damage. And then finally, last but not least, I'm going to swing into play with the flame tongue totem, and that will then let me do 10 to his hero and really give him something to think about. Now, because he's a hunter, unless he has a kill command and a beast or some charging beasts,
your magic shall not save you.
okay, that does bring me down to nothing. He should have silenced my flame tongue, but I think he just wanted that down. My beasts have charge, but he has no beasts. He's gone for the flame tongue totem. Now our friend here is quite vulnerable. He has taken 8 damage off of me. However, I will have some more options. There may be a kill this turn. I just need to do a little bit of calculating. So we've got 8 damage there. We've got 12 damage. We've got 14 damage. So we need another 6. With the Rockbiter weapon, we can add another 3. With the Flame Tongue totem, we can add another 2. So that gives us 16, 19, 18. And then with the Rockbiter weapon, I think that will give us sufficient to slam in. And well played. There is the victory against the Hunter deck, which is pretty enjoyable. I quite enjoyed playing that Shaman game. Hitting the illustrious heights of rank 18 there. Lovely. A cheeky little ding. And a little quest as well. So let us get just the one more custom Shaman game in. I know we've run a bit over our half hour. We need to, quickly wrap this up pretty soon. Really appreciate you guys tuning in. But as you saw in that game, even though we did not copy the deck list in its entirety that we were trying to look for, we managed to swap in some good cards that were, in terms of the theories to what they were trying to do and why they were in there, we swapped some legendaries for some slightly cheaper cards, and that worked okay. And this will be a very interesting matchup. We've now got ourselves against a Shaman as well, so let's see how the battle of the mirror matching ladder Shamans is going to work out. I don't know whether he's going to be trying to play like me or not, so I've got multiple lightning storms. I'm going to keep one. I'm going second. Remember that my goal is to draw cards early game and keep his side of the deck under control. And it looks as though I've got the options to be able to do that.
The light protects me.
Splendid. And we have immediately the option that we want. Silence a minion, do 1 damage. Note that the order in which that resolves means that it silences, gets through the bubble, and then does the 1 damage. So silence removes his divine shield. Which was good. Interestingly, that Argent Squire meant that maybe he's trying to trade with minions as well. He's just got a straight up totem turn 2. And for me, the Loot Hoarder is the obvious option. Not only can I take out his totem, but I will draw a card as well. So that keeps my theme of the deck very much going. Totemic Call hits the deck as well, and thankfully it wasn't a Stoneclaw. That could have caused us some trouble. And we still don't know what our opponent has got in store for us. We, in the absence of any opposition, are just going to keep drawing cards. So I'm going to get my mana tied down and start stuffing my hand, and we've got that Mountain Giant, 7 mana at the moment, going to be 6 mana next turn, 5 mana the turn after that. Okay, he's now got a Chillwind Yeti down. Chillwind Yeti, of course, one of those real solid core cards. It's a basic card, of course. It has that 4 magic attack number. That means that it's not too within the attack range for priests. It's got solid damage, solid health, and can get out turn 4 as well. So a very nice piece of kit that you've got there. I don't really want that Yeti to be hanging around overtly long, so what I think I'm actually going to do is team up a bit. I'm going to go in for the Overload. The Stormforged Axe will let me have 2. The friendly character then having an extra 3 with a Rockbiter, and in terms of that, I'm just going to simply trade away my health, use it as a resource as we talked about before, and then just take that off the table. Yes, I do take that 4 damage, but also, most importantly, I've still got table control. So if he doesn't have minions on the table, I'm still going to be drawing cards with my Mana Tide. He can't kill my totem. I still have got a card to draw with Loot Hoard, and I've got that giant to come as well. Triple Overload, and the Earth Elemental hits the deck. This is where I need my Hex. The Hex is not going to be coming out. He's got an overload of 3, but that is now a very, very dangerous minion to have in play. Can I remove 8 this turn? I do not think I can. And sadly, I'm just locked out from dropping my Mountain Giant, but that will be good very soon. I've actually got 2 Lightning Bolts. I could double Overload and remove that from the table, really to put a lock on. And in fact, in the spirit of curiosity, that's what I'm going to do. Double Overload into attack and sacrifice to draw a card with my final guy. Now, at this stage, I may think about starting to do a little bit of damage. With my remaining 2 mana, I've got a couple of options. I can give attack to my Mana Tide totem, or I can summon a random totem, which may or may not give me something of use. Having something to be able to tank and do some damage would be good, so I'm just going to throw that in there and see what we've got. And luckily enough, I drew the Stank Roll, so it's nice that these kind of things work out on occasion. So we feel pretty good. 3 damage overload, the Lightning Bolt finally comes out, and there goes my Mana Tide. However, for that 3 mana I've drawn 3 cards, which is very, very good. The Argent Commander is now in play now, of course, because we've been overloading so much. We've got a little bit of an issue in that we can't be really throwing out exactly what we wanted. Now that's 5 mana. If I coin into anything, I'm in a bit of trouble, so I just need to make sure I keep my strategy slowly plodding forward whilst nice, that will do a very good job, and for that reason I'm just going to trade away and buy a turn. So the Flame Tongue will let me do some more trading. I've got my tank, the Fire Elemental comes out and the Battle Cry with 3 damage. This is why I wanted my Fire Elemental in the deck, yet you can't do anything else. So now note that I've got all my mana back and I can just go ahead and Hex, which is great. Do remember that my opposing Shaman friend here will of course also have a Hex, so we just need to be a little bit careful with that. This is a good time to swing away with my Shamanic hero, and for that remaining 4, what have I got options to do? I can stretch myself to 5, but that's still not going to let me get that out. It's a little bit frustrating at this point in time that I did sort of jump out with that, but it's good to get that big throw out of the way. I would have had to do that regardless.
I wonder.
It looks as though
I can't do that.
he has no attack. I'll drop him on the table. I'm just going to go ahead, and this is probably not the best play. I should save this for something more useful. I'm just going to tickle him with my Rock Biter weapon and let him know that I'm in business. He's been attacking me so far. It's time to turn some tables. He's clearly wanting to do a 3 damage. Is going to go, interestingly, not on the spell damage totem. And because he's not done it on the spell damage totem, sadly that actually gives me the ability to pick him off this go. 3 to 4 damage to 2 enemy minions. If it does fall, I can finish off with the Earth Shock. In fact, I can finish them off either way. So it's worth the 2 overload here. And the reason for that 2 overload is, again, table control. The table control will be invaluable to me. And then let's reach out with the Earth Shock. Pick him off the table. So I'm locked out of 2 next go, very, very frustratingly. I've got 2 giants that I want to be swinging away with there as well. The healing totem goes down. And again, I'm going to have to buy another turn, but you've noted that I've just been picking away as threats. 2 Fire Elementals have gone down. And again, a Boulder Fist Ogre goes down. 1/1 Boulder Fist Ogre. I do have another Hex somewhere in this deck. It'd be nice if that came out, but it's not going to right now. What I can do now, though, is start putting out my own big attacking threats myself. So, options. I'm not going to sacrifice so much health on the Boulder Fist Ogre. That could be a decent option. Instead, what I'm going to do is make a declaration of intent and say, hey, I've got a giant, and I'm not afraid to use it. I've got a direct trade where I can remove that from the table now as well. So I've got my pretty much full array of totems up. Doomhammer goes down. He can start swinging away with his Wind Fury, and he can actually pick off 2 totems, which will be, I think, what he does in this instance. That opens me up to attack. Interestingly, he's gone for the hero, a rush. The minions are trading away with other things, and he's actually hexed my man in giants. Should have seen that coming. Here's hoping my hex comes up. What have we got in terms of options? Well, we can silence down this Boulder Fist Ogre, which will do a bit less damage, and then the Divine Shielded Charge will put some pressure on as well. I could really deal with that area of effect clearance spell, or alternatively I just whip out Ragnaros and see how he deals with it. This is not the wisest play, let me tell you for free. However, it'll be interesting to see what he does with it. I'm going to take the 3 to pick one of those off the table, and hey, if I get fluky... Oh, that's not what I wanted to happen. I was hoping to get fluky and remove the Boulder Fist. He can of course remove my tank, he can swing in for another 7. If he's got burst cards, I'm actually within critical damage range. He could very much just pick me off and get rid of me at this point in time. So that was a bit of a risky move. I've actually let my health slip now too low. From being in a position of control, I've now really got myself in a position of not control. Not quite so good. Yeah, me removing the spell damage, sensible play. He's got 8 mana and 4 cards. Could have another hex up his sleeve, another Boulder Fist Ogre going down, and he is just sensibly deciding to rush on in and get the pressure on. 7 health of pain. What options do we now have? I will be able to pick off one of these, so this is where a very careful calculation needs to come into play. There's no point playing the giant because he will just now be dead. I can drop an Argent Commander. If I drop a Flame Tongue Totem, the Argent Commander will then go up to 6, but that's not going to pick off both in one go. Silence will take 1 health off of him, which will bring him into slightly more critical range. I can sort of extend myself to an 11 health. Do I want to be powering up that minion for a trade, or do I want to be powering up the Argent Commander? Calculation time. 10 for Ragnaros isn't going to do a huge amount because he can't attack. The giant is not going to do anything. I can't shield. The Spellbreaker will... Either way, it's not going to let me live next turn.
That minion already attacked.
It's going to be a bit of a challenge. I think this could be a good game. This could be a good game. Let's see what we got there. Flame Tongue Totem. It's all gone. It's all gone. Even if I'm lucky, which I'm not, it's all gone. So that one was done. It was a good game, very enjoyable. But we can see there was the challenge of trying to balance managing resources. I had the board under control for oh so much of that match, but when it came to it at the end I'd just taken too much health damage, and I could not, when it came to it, actually control his big minions. They weren't even massively scary big minions in terms of abilities, they were just there and big threats and out at the right time, and I could not control it. So that is it for tonight's Hearthstone Half Hour. We've overrun a bit, so thank you very much for staying with us throughout. Just to wrap up, we do 4 or 5 nights a week. Monday is new player sort of decks and concepts night. Tuesday is arena. Wednesday is ladder Wednesday as you've seen today, but we did something a bit different. Thursday we go through tactics, techniques. Friday we take a game off and don't do Hearthstone, do something different and fun. Expect some Heroes of the Storm shoutcasting from us soon. We're going to be doing the fantastic Blizzard contests in terms of so you think you can cast. It's not dancing, it's casting. I can maybe cast. Dancing, perhaps not so much. Where can you find more stuff? Firstly, can we just say, please, 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 if you've seen this, whether on YouTube or Twitch or our website or Twitter, if you can sign in, drop us a tweet, comment, let us know what you like, what you don't like, and how you think we can make this better for you. Where can you find us? Our video archive is always at youtube.com/failcraftcasts. Just like our name, you can find all of our old videos there, and then some other stuff, League of Legends, StarCraft, and similar besides. Twitch.tv, we're live every night, twitch.tv/failcraftcast. Find us there too. You can sign up for a free Twitch TV account. You can get email subscriptions when we are live. Just get a little email in your inbox telling us, beg pardon, when you can tune in. Twitter, twitter.com/failcraftcasts. On Twitter, you can also just give us a shout. We'd love to hear from you, and please keep chatting to us. We'd really love to hear what you're up to. And then, last but not least, the website is failcraft.org. You can find all of our videos, longer written blog articles, some strategy articles, and then also most importantly, some things that live better in a written format, so deck lists, all of those kind of links and things too. Thank you very much for tuning in. It's always great to see you, and we hope to see you again very, very soon with Felcroft Casts or the Hearthstone Half Hour, or indeed